Machine Dana, you are such a legend and your...
Well, it's text to speech, so text to... You get the picture. If you don't know what text to speech... Okay, so the first thing I'm going to go through is the extension that you can get on your Twitch channel. I think this is also available or something similar for YouTube as well, but don't quote me on that and don't ask me questions about it because I don't know as much about the YouTube gaming one, okay? So I'm sorry if you do YouTube gaming and I can't answer your questions. So within your stream manager, so that's your username / stream manager, you can go to extensions here. There are loads of different types of extensions you can get that enable text to speech, and they all have different like good things and bad things about them. I've used one called Say It Live. Now with Say It Live, let's just go into the discovery, do a search for Say It Live, and there it is. You have to click the install button and that will install it, and you can configure it by pressing the cog button here. You do need to make sure that it's actually in the activated
Winner.
Lego.
Get ready. Begin. Winner. Get ready. Begin. OG pump shotgun. OG pump shotgun.
Te voy a llevar a visitar las estrellas. Hacerte llorar, una bella. Te voy a tocar enteramente. Hacerte el amor. Soy un pavo que va
Welcome to the How to Piece Control map. This map First step to learning how to piece control is understanding what it is. If you look at the bot right in front of you here, you'll see that half of the builds are yours and half of them are the enemy's. The goal throughout a fight is to try to get as many builds around the enemy as possible, because the more builds you have, the more peaks you can set up. If they owned all the builds, then they're nice and safe in their structure, but if you even own one wall, you may have an opportunity to make an edit and take a shot on the enemy. Practice taking some shots on this first sentry here. You own all the builds around an enemy. This is the best scenario for you. You have them full boxed or full pieced. When you have all the piece on the enemy, they have no escape. All you got to do now is set up a nice peek shot, which we'll go into more later. If you're ever in a team game mode and you have all the builds around the enemy, a lot of times you want to wait for your teammate to get there. Tell your teammate you have them full boxed, and when your teammate gets there, you jump in together and you can get a free kill. Now Just like in the first representation, in this scenario, you have partial peace on the enemy. What this means is you own a few builds and not all of them. Sometimes in this situation, you'll be able to take a shot before they get away. Other times, they'll escape out of the builds that they own. Now, whenever you have partial peace like this, you can do a thing called pre-boxing. Head over to the next drill to find out what that is. Walk around this box real quick. Notice how you own all the builds except for one wall. If the enemy owns just that one wall, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to try to escape out that direction. This is an opportunity for you to pre-box the enemy. If you know that they're going to escape out a certain direction, or even if you just think they're going to run out that way, you can make a box in that direction and they'll walk into your builds. And doing that is called a pre-box. It's important to note that cones are one of the most useful builds in the game. You may be wondering why. Cones can place farther than any other build. Try to stand as far away from this sentry as possible and hold out your cone bind. Look at how far that bad boy places. You can place a cone from almost an entire box away. But not only that, place a wall in front of this sentry here. If you look over the wall, the cone will place over the sentry a box away. So when you're in a fight, it's super important to try to look for opportunities to use cones to trap the enemy. Whether it be getting them stuck on a ramp when you get them coned, or placing it over walls just like I just showed you. Use cones more and you'll end up outplaying your opponent way more often. Around this box row, it's important to note that cones are one of the most useful builds in the game. You may be wondering why. Cones can place farther than any other build. Try to stand as far away from this sentry as possible and hold out your cone bind. Look at how far that bad boy places. You can place a cone from almost an entire box away. But not only that, place a wall in front of this sentry here. If you look over the wall, the cone will place over the sentry a box away. So when you're in a fight, it's super important to try to look for opportunities to use cones to trap the enemy. Whether it be getting them stuck on a ramp when you get them coned, or placing it over walls just like I just showed you. Use cones more and you'll end up outplaying your opponent way more often. Another important thing to know is that you can place walls pretty far from yourself as well. Try standing still a layer below the sentry here and hold out your walls. Then look straight up. Notice how you can place a wall in front of the sentry. That is basically called a high wall. You can use high walls in so many different situations: to block shots from people above you, to get a wall on an enemy above you, just like you just did to this sentry. By getting that wall, you can edit it and set up a peek and get the kill. There's lots of ways to use high walls, which you'll learn throughout this map, but that's just the basics of it. Now it's time to understand right-hand peaks, which is one of the most important things to get down. Position yourself to the left of the window here. Try to make it so that the sentry can't see you. If you quickly walk to the right, take a shot, and then reset the wall. That is an example of a right-hand peak. In the next section of tutorials, we're going to be completely focusing on first peak we're going over is one of the most common. It's called a peanut butter peak. Why, you might be wondering? Probably because a peanut butter sandwich is best when it's cut in diagonal. To do this peak, you want to make the triangle, but when you confirm that triangle, make sure you're off to the left. If you're not far enough off to the left, the enemy's going to have an angle on you, and they're going to shoot you. Once you make the edit, you want to jump upwards and to the left while taking the shot. And as soon as you shoot, reset your wall. For all the peaks we're going to be going over, always try to reset your wall after taking your shot. That way, if your shot doesn't kill the enemy, they won't be able to do counter damage because you will like reset that wall. And the other thing you need to know throughout these drills is try to have a cone in your box for the most part. If you don't have a cone in your box and you edit a peak, the enemy can just ramp over you. And a lot of times, that's going to mess up your chance of ending the fight. Is a window peak. And now there's something you need to know. Try editing a window on the far right, and then make a far left, and then make one in the middle. Notice how the middle window peak is a lot bigger than the other two. This means you need to be careful whenever you do a middle window peak. Simply because if you're not far enough off to the left, the enemy's gonna have an angle on you and they're gonna shoot. So practice some different window peaks here. When you feel comfortable, move on to the next one. Is a window peak. And now there's something you need to know. Try editing a window on the far right, and then make a far left, and then make one in the middle. Notice how the middle window peak is a lot bigger than the other two. This means you need to be careful whenever you do a middle window peak. Simply because if you're not far enough off to the left, the enemy's gonna have an angle on you and they're gonna shoot. So practice some different window peaks here, and when you feel comfortable, move on to the next one. Is called a low wall. The way you do this peak is you crouch underneath the wall and then go up to take the peak. Try placing a cone underneath you while doing this peak, because typically when you're in a fight, you're gonna want to have a cone in your box, otherwise the enemy might be able to put a ramp over you. So practice setting up this peak and all the rest of them with cones in your box. That way you can get some variety practice. Is called a low wall. The way you do this peak is you crouch underneath the wall and then go up to take the peak. Try placing a cone underneath you while doing this peak, because typically when you're in a fight, you're gonna want to have a cone in your box, otherwise the enemy might be able to put a ramp over you. What about when you have piece control above the enemy? This is the type of edit you want to do. Edit the right tiles of your floor and cones and stand off to the left. A lot of times in this situation, the enemy is going to try to jump up in the place that you edit to take a shot on you. So be ready to place a wall just in case they go for that jump shot on you. But for now, practice editing those right tiles, and when you step into your peak, reset the floor. That way the enemy couldn't take a shot on you. final peak we're going to go over is when the enemy's above you. The peak I have set up here is a bit complicated. You want to be on a ramp, have a floor above you, edit the back tile of the floor, and place another ramp above you. Then you can jump through the tile while you take a shot, and it's one of the most protected peaks in the game. It's called the Martaz peak. There are, of course, other ways to set up peaks from below. For example, you can try ramping up towards the enemy, placing a wall, and edit a window in the wall, and then it's just like a normal window peak. You can do the same thing with a peanut butter peak, a low wall. Practice doing a variety of things, and then you've completed your peak peak. You're off to the next task, which is piece control behind peaks. Welcome to the third room, and this is probably going to be the most complicated one. This is the room where we finally start to piece control the enemies, but you get the insider scoop. I'm going to teach you some pro techniques to do it the best way possible. I have all the same peak scenarios set up as the previous room. Let's start with the triangle edit here. What I want you to do is position yourself so that the sentry cannot see you, just like we did for the peaks. The goal is to not get shot while piece controlling the enemy. So while you're behind this peak, try to place a cone in their box, walls around them, and a cone on top. You're probably already noticing that that left wall is hard to get without exposing yourself. Typically, when I'm piece controlling from behind a peak, I leave that wall open, but while doing it from behind a triangle edit, if you look upwards and to the left, you can still get that wall. Only if you look in the perfect spot. But practice piece controlling this first target from behind this peak on repeat, and set up good peak shots and reset your wall after your shots. This is going to be the hardest part of getting this down, but I'm telling you, it's going to pay off. Once you're ready, you can move on to the windows. Window peak, it works exactly the same. You just have to stand off to the left of your window, and then you can place the cone above and below, and the back wall and the right wall. The left wall is going to be impossible to place without exposing yourself here, but it's okay. The way I approach it is if I see the enemy going out the left, I'll try to build an entire box out the left side before they get there. Or if you see them going to the left, you could just step into the window a little bit more and place that left wall. But for now, just leave that left wall open and focus on getting all the way behind the peak and setting up a good peak shot. And of course, reset your wall after every shot you take. Now, while you're on this drill, I got one more tip for you. Try placing a ramp in their box instead of a cone. If you get the sentry underneath the ramp, then you can get all the walls around him. You don't need to worry about being behind the peak until you edit the ramp. If you want to take that shot, you just set up the edit on the ramp, get behind your window peak, and take the peak shot. Give it a try and then move on to the next when you're ready.